It's with great pleasure that I welcome back Dr. Sean Patel, who's the CEO and founder of Prep Expert, the title sponsor of the College Admissions Process podcast. Sean, you have a special message for the listeners?
Hey, John, I just wanted to mention for all the parents and students who are listening to this great podcast, we have a really special offer only for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast for Prep Expert. So, if your student is going to be taking an online SAT, ACT, PSAT course anytime soon, or is looking for one-on-one tutoring with top 1% tutors, head over to prepexpert.com. We offer live online courses for every college admissions exam. On top of that, we have the best score guarantees, best curriculum, and best instructors in the test prep industry. And just for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast, you can get 20% off any online SAT or PSAT or ACT course, as well as one-on-one tutoring. So you can get 20% off. Just make sure you use the promo code College Talk. That's one word, College Talk, and you'll get 20% off just for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast. And I hope you guys can use that to your advantage, save a bunch of money at prepexpert.com.
Thank you so much, Sean. And to everyone out there, once again, that promo code is College Talk. That's one word, College Talk. Thank you all, and best wishes. Welcome to The Cap, where we are here to speak with college reps and other professionals in the field of college admissions to help answer all your questions and guide you through every step of the process. So if you're serious about college admissions, you've come to the right place. Are you ready? Let's talk about it. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Durante. Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome Jason McGrath, who's the Vice President for Enrollment Management at the College of Wooster. Jason, it is so good to see you again. I'm so glad that we got a chance to spend some time together when we were in person at NACAC. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, John. I really appreciate the opportunity to do this and spend this time with you. I know we were catching up a little before this. And again, just appreciate the way you put these together. And it's a great opportunity for us as well.
Well, it's my honor and pleasure. And again, it's thanks to people like yourself and all of your colleagues that come on that allow me to do this work that has been so rewarding and truly so much fun. So let's get right to it, Jason. For listeners who may not be familiar with the College of Wooster, could you begin by sharing the core mission and educational philosophy that guide the institution and what makes Wooster stand out among national liberal arts colleges?
I appreciate this question, and I think it's one of the ones that I think can get a little bit too theoretical at times, so I'm going to go and kind of cut to the chase that I think defines us really well. The College of Wooster is often talked about as being a place where independent minds work together. And it has meaning both socially, culturally, as well as academically. Social and culturally, it really speaks to a place, and you'll hear our president say this, where students can be free to be themselves. If that means how you wear your hair or your fashion or your music, that's fine. It could be deeper than that for someone. It might be about identity or worldviews. But one of the things I've even heard echoed by counselors, school counselors who have visited, when they ask our students about differing opinions on campus, our students embrace difference, and they really see it as a chance for growth and learning. So that's where the social cultural angle comes together with independent minds working together. And academically, it's tied to our decades-long history of a place where seniors complete a year-long student-designed, faculty-mentored senior independent study project, and we call this IS. And we'll cover and talk more about this as we go along, but unlike a lot of colleges, the real defining factor here at Wooster is that it means that every student who graduates from Wooster has a connected academic experience that demonstrates sort of tangible evidence for employers and graduate schools of what they're capable of producing. And for us, we also celebrate these achievements through campus parades and big events, IS Monday. There's a lot of celebration, and it's about bringing this individualism, if you will, into the community. And because everyone's experiencing it, it really tightens and creates a thread that connects everyone on our campus. And some examples of these include students who have done documentary work about migrant workers in North Carolina, music compositions, an economic study of NFL quarterback salaries and the effects on the franchise. Students can really have fun with these topics.
Well, we really appreciate the overview, and I love what you said. You have students who truly embrace differences, which really makes up the amazing community at Wooster. And we're going to hear more about the independent study experience in just a minute. So, Jason, Wooster is built around inquiry, research, and close faculty mentorship, as you mentioned, especially through the independent study experience. When you review applications, what qualities or habits of mind signal that a student is not only intellectually curious, but ready to thrive in a community that values independent thinking, deep engagement, and a genuine love of learning?
Well, always want to start with helping students understand that, like most institutions, at least the ones I know of and that I've been a part of, we read applications looking for reasons to admit students. We are all human. We are not looking for perfection. There are always going to be imperfections or flaws. That's natural. What we're looking for is for students who, if they've experienced a challenge or a roadblock along the way academically or personally, that's natural. That's to be expected. What we're hoping to learn if they share that is, how have they come out on the other side of it? What are they experiencing now? How are they a different person from that experience? And so we look for that if that's present in an application. It's not about having a challenge in your life. It's about what you've learned, how you've grown and become who you are today as a result of it. We really want students at Worcester who are curious-minded and like to question and explore intellectually. But we also recognize that not every 16 to 18-year-old can easily or comfortably share that language, if you will, in an application, right? The application only asks so many questions. There's only so many ways to show that. So it's our job to kind of find these threads of evidence through the layers in which we read an application. And we review application notes, we review interview notes, and some students will interview, and we encourage that if they're interested. And we piece all that together in the review process. And so what these threads can sometimes look like, it might be a teacher that shares the way a student engages in classroom discussion. It could be a thread that is tied to the essay that they wrote, and it shares a story or a narrative about home life or a family experience that, again, adds a layer of depth to their application and helps us see this is someone who's really interested in exploring and isn't just sort of there as a passive learner.
Well, we really appreciate what you said there. There is so much that I want to unpackage. First of all, you talked about the fact that in admissions, you are human beings reviewing the applications. You know, Jason, many times students and families think, well, our admissions office is using AI to review the applications. And so I'm glad that you emphasize the fact that you are, in fact, humans and you're looking for reasons to admit. So, yes, it is your job to find those reasons to admit. But I also want to point out to students, it's your job to make sure that your marketing package, this thing we call the college application, is comprehensive. Know what each piece is supposed to tell in terms of your story, how each piece needs to complement each other, build upon each other, and make sure that you're not missing any gaps. For example, and Jason pointed it out, if there was a challenge, how did you overcome it? See if there's a way for you to include that in the overall application, perhaps using the additional information section, whatever it is. But again, students, they're looking to admit your job is to make sure that your story is complete. Now, Jason, you also mentioned interviews. So is that something that's optional? Do you recommend it? Let's just unpackage that a little bit for Wooster.
Yeah, a lot of times when students will visit campus, we'll offer opportunities for discussions one-on-one, and we take notes about that information, and we'll have that tucked away in the application record. Other times, students will interview in advance before arriving on campus with one of our senior interns or one of our staff members. And again, most of the time, what I find, I think students in the world of interviewing and college admissions and the places I've been a part of, when we've done this, I always remind students that it's optional in the places I've been a part of. It's optional at Worcester. If you're comfortable having a conversation with someone that is your parents' age or several years older than you, and you feel like you can share yourself comfortably in that space, take advantage of it. It doesn't hurt anything to add up that layer of depth, that layer of understanding about who you are. And oftentimes we can learn things about you that aren't as easy to kind of put on paper, virtual paper, if you will, in the application itself. So it's something that's additional that complements what we're learning about you through the required parts of the application.
Well, we really appreciate that. And the application is definitely something that's really important to students and their families. And they want to know, once a student submits their application, what does the evaluation process look like in your office? In other words, How many readers typically review a file, and what kinds of conversations or considerations guide your committee's decisions?
It's a great question, and it is the question that I think in all my I've been doing this over 20 years. It's the students think there's some mystery or there's some secret way to get into a school or there's something truly to uncover. I am proud to say that at Worcester, like the places I've worked before, our process is every bit as holistic, every bit as context aware as anywhere I've been. We always make sure there are at least two people weighing in on an application review process. That just keeps it moving. And then we have other people that get involved in some of that final decision making. So there's layers. There's at least 2 to 3, there could be 4 people. And then when we have separate scholarship processes, there's a whole nother group of people that may weigh in and review that information that was submitted for the application itself. So our committee is trying to really look to see will the student do well, be successful academically at Worcester? But we are a community. And so we're looking for community members. So we're trying to figure out with the layers of support that we have available on our campus, which are plentiful, will this student academically thrive? Will this student take off socially? Will they perhaps add to areas of excellence that we are already really thriving and proud of? Or will they add layers for us that we need to be stronger in, we need to grow in these areas? And again, when it comes to how they demonstrate that in an application, oftentimes in the activities section where they're listing what they've been involved in, students, I think, can undersell themselves. They maybe leave out a job. They leave out how they care for family members at home. So we want to know the full story of who they are because we recognize that everyone brings a different talent to the table. And we're trying to figure out, not that everyone needs to have everything, we're trying to figure out how these pieces come together to form the community that we have here. So our team gets pretty passionate about advocacy. We read by territory. So there's always a territory manager in the review process for an application because they know that high school. They know that community even better than perhaps someone else might. And so together they inform that discussion as we have some really heated in the most positive way debates, if you will, about students because our people care. And that's one of the things that's really special about Worcester is the people here wear our care for the admissions process on our sleeve. There are moments of joy in this process, and the reading of an application is really certainly part of that for us.
Well, that's terrific. I appreciate you talking about your territory managers who, like you said, become experts in the high schools that are in their territory. So students, if you have a rep that visits your high school, most likely that's someone who's going to be reading your application. So definitely stop in and say hello. I also appreciate how you emphasize your community and that you encourage students, if you have a job or perhaps you're a caretaker for a family member, those are things that you want to know in the application review to really get a sense not only of the type of student that the applicant might be academically, but you really want to get a sense of how they're going to contribute and hopefully build upon the awesome Worcester community. Now, another question that comes up a lot in my conversation is this notion of ED, early decision. And I noticed that Worcester has an ED1 and an ED2 round. So Jason, is there a benefit to applying ED? I know it's definitely the best way to demonstrate your interest, right? Because it's a binding agreement, but are there any benefits?
I love the question only because I think ED itself, depending on the institution, depending on the school community a student's coming from, there's pressure in some communities and perhaps more so at some highly selective private high schools than others. And I hear this from school counselors where they may have half of their class, graduating class, going early decision somewhere. I'm here to remind students that that's not typical, right? Early decision is an opportunity. If you know a school is 100% the right place for you, you've talked to our financial aid office, you've done the early aid estimator that allows you to get a good sense of what the financial aid package might look like at Worcester. It's your chance to sort of say, I want to be there, read my application knowing I'm fully committed. And then when we admit you, you deposit, you're done. And this is where I really want to emphasize. There are different nuances that may be about housing or course selection, sometimes about other benefits that schools talk about with early decision. But I would really want to emphasize to a student, it's a chance to sort of be done with the stress of this process when you're ready to be done with it. If you're ready at early decision, go through that process, complete that process, and then take advantage of the rest of senior year to be a high school student for those last few months you have that opportunity. I'm not here to get too sappy about it, but I'm a parent of two kids that are in college right now. And I think back to their moments of they finished senior year of high school. And we can think about this as much older folks. Those moments go by quickly. And so I'd rather a student feel good about the decision, number one, feel confident they made the right decision, but also feel confident that they can now move forward and start getting excited about that place they're going to go versus wondering where they're going to go. But again, developmentally, not everyone's ready in October, November in these decision windows to submit that application. But at Wooster, that's a great opportunity. We have a lot of our staff ready to have those conversations if students want to learn more.
Well, I think that's such great advice. First of all, like you said, if you use the net price calculator and you know that this is the college for you and you want to go ED, fantastic. Perhaps you don't have that one school, but you could apply early action, which is also pretty early in the process. To your point, then students, you can take advantage and enjoy that thing that we call senior year, as Jason said, which only comes around once. So if you can get the applications in early, whether you're going with the binding agreement or not, it's really worth it so that, again, you could hopefully then just relax and enjoy that once in a lifetime senior year. Now, Jason, you see transcripts from students in AP, IB, honors, dual enrollment, early college, and many other curricular backgrounds. How does Wooster assess academic rigor fairly and consistently across such different high schools?
Well, this question's a great one for me to kind of put a plug in for our profession, if you will. I think it's, and I don't say this in any sort of defensive way, but I think there's a lot of times conversations that emerge that people feel like admissions is this or admissions is that. And I think what people forget is it's a profession and it takes a lot of training and a lot of time for people to get really competent at understanding the nuances and differences between the different transcripts we see, both internationally as well as the different ones that exist within the US. So at Wooster, we're really looking for students that seek academic challenge, whatever that might look like in their particular community. So there are certainly well-resourced communities that have in-depth AP programs, full IB programs, Cambridge programs. There's just so many different kind of known, if you will, advanced college level programs. But there's also plenty of communities that students don't have access to that. You know, we're based in Ohio. We have plenty of those communities that have the AP and IB. But like a lot of states, people forget about the more rural or less resourced communities that don't have that access. They don't have enough faculty or resources to offer the full AP curriculum. So they may offer one AP, and the rest they may be encouraging students to do something like dual enrollment, where they're taking local college classes. What we want to see is a student take advantage of what's available to them. So when they submit their application, typically we have a way of assessing and understanding what their school offers or what might be available in their community. So when we look at that transcript, we're looking to see, okay, these were a couple AP courses, or maybe there are no AP courses and there's some honors classes, or maybe there's no honors classes, but there's some courses offered at, and there's a code associated with it at a community college or a local college. And that's perfectly fine. Students need to really feel comfortable knowing that we understand those differences between different communities. We also know there are some schools that are very rigorous to even be accepted into, typically a private high school or a magnet school. And some of those schools will tell us that every course with a code of X is equivalent to a college level course. So I'm kind of giving you a thorough answer, but I really want students to understand that we are professionally training ourselves, professionally trained through our industry to really dissect these transcripts in a way of advocacy, but in a way that is looking for where was their challenge and how well did they seek that challenge.
Well, I appreciate that. And, you touched upon something that I understand where you were going, I believe, but I don't know that everyone necessarily understood what you were talking about, which is this. If I'm a student that's in a high school that has over 20 AP course offerings, but they also have their fair share, for example, of dual enrollment, how do I pick? And perhaps, let me ask it this way. Is it based on the context of the high school in terms of whether or not they weigh both the AP and the dual enrollment? Perhaps they only weigh AP. Is that something that ever comes into play in terms of the school profile and how the different types of courses are weighed in a particular high school? I'm asking because maybe that'll give some insight to students and families in terms of what to choose when they're putting their courses together for whatever the next year is for them.
And I appreciate the follow-up. It's a good point to clarify. I would say at Wooster, we're not going to be concerned if it's an AP or a dual enrollment or an IB or dual enrollment. We're going to be comfortable that you're seeking college-level rigor as long as it's clear from your high school that that is what they would view as the rigorous path. I think for other students who are looking at a wide range of colleges and universities, and again, I've worked at major research universities. I've worked at top 15 universities. And these places at times can really dig in a way that they're trying to understand what you talk about weighting and how a course might be weighted. I think of it within a school community, if they're going to say AP is weighted at 1 and 1 extra credit and a dual enrollment's weighted at half of an extra credit, that student needs to have a conversation with their school counselor and potentially have individual conversations with the 5 schools they're applying to get a clear understanding of how that school specifically is going to interpret that information. The places I've been, one of the pieces and challenges a student faces is if they're not sure whether they're going to be looking at a public institution in their state or a private institution in their state, or a private institution elsewhere. Some students choosing public schools may find dual enrollment as a faster track to get credits if that's what they're looking to do. If they're not worried about getting the credits, if you will, and it's just a matter of demonstrating rigor, then it's that conversation with the counselor and with the schools they're considering. But I think what they're generally going to find is schools are always going to be context aware when they're selective schools, and they're going to understand that there were choices a student had to make. But I think it's really clear. I tell students that I defer to your school counselor and how they share the context of your school with me. And if they tell me AP and dual enrollment is the same rigor, I'm going to accept that. And if they tell me it's different, then that's how I'm going to read the application.
Well, great insights. And definitely students speak to your school counselors often. And frankly, they are the experts without a doubt. Now, Jason, do you rely on the GPA reported by the high school, or does Wooster recalculate GPA? And if you recalculate, which courses or areas carry the most weight?
This is a question students ask frequently, and I think for us, Worcester really takes the GPA, I'll say weighted, but the GPA that the school provides, the context they provide it within. So if they are giving us an actual class rank, we're going to consider that along with the rigor that we see, and we talked about rigor a moment ago. So the cumulative review of the GPA within the class rank context, within the rigor context, is how we're going to take all of that. We tend to not recalculate a GPA. We tend to take it at face value based on what the school provides, believing that the school has a system that they believe in that represents their students most accurately. So we take it at face value. Most of the places I've been, that's the general read of the file of the application. But it doesn't mean that there aren't times where you want to unpack it a little bit and say, let me just look at the core classes academically, math and English, social science, humanities, and natural sciences, foreign language, and see what the core grades look like in that space. But at Worcester, we're not recalculating. We're taking it at face value based on what the school provides. And I don't want students to get too worried about things like class rank. Again, it's within context. I like to think about Worcester as a place, and one of the reasons I liked coming back to Worcester, and I know we didn't talk too much about this live, I worked at Worcester between 2002 and 2006 as my first admissions job. Went to 2 other places that are highly selective for the last 19 years before coming back. What I love about Worcester is that we can take students who might hit the ground walking as well as students who hit the ground running. And we get them all able to get to that finish line running by the time they graduate with that IS program. So I don't want students to get too panicked worrying about things like weighted GPA or unweighted GPA with Worcester specifically.
Hey, podcast friends, if you've been enjoying the College Admissions Process podcast, I'm excited to share my new book, Straight from the Admissions Office, Insider Strategies for College Applications. It's packed with insights and tips from over 250 podcast episodes with admissions professionals designed to make the college process less overwhelming. Whether you're a student, parent, or college counselor, it's a valuable resource for navigating the admissions process. By grabbing a copy, you're also helping to support the podcast. The links are in the show notes. Thank you, and best wishes to all with the college admissions process. Well, that's great insight. And again, you keep on also pointing back to the context of the student's high school in terms of what is offered there. Obviously, students do the best you can in terms of taking the most challenging courses, and that's going to be different for each and every student. But again, it points to the fact of being familiar students with the context of your own high school. So there is this thing called the school profile. Every admissions office gets it. They do review it based on your high school. And if you're an educated consumer, it would be worth going to your counseling office. Many times it's on your high school website just to familiarize yourself with your own high school profile to see what the admissions professionals review when they're looking at your overall application. Now, Jason, what is Wooster's current philosophy on standardized testing? And what guidance would you offer students who are unsure? This comes up all the time. Should I submit? Should I not submit? Jason, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I think testing is sort of everyone's least favorite topic, but it's one of the most commonly asked things that we face in college admissions. At Wooster, we are test optional, and if you tell us you want us to consider your test score, we will do just that. If you tell us you don't want us to consider your test score, we won't consider it. I will also add that includes times where there are school communities who, for reasons that they believe are important, still provide test scores on transcripts. And when we get those and a student has asked us not to use their testing, we don't use it even if it's on the transcript. So I want to put them at ease because I know there's a lot of pressure on school counselors to make decisions that have to work best for their school community. And so sometimes a school will send that and it's on there, and we have a conversation as a group and we say that we're not using that because the student applied test optional for us. Furthermore, when it comes to considering testing for Wooster, we don't use it at all when it comes to our scholarship process. So whether you've told us to use it for admission or not use it for admission, we still don't consider it at all when it comes to scholarship because we want to be considering the same factors for everybody when it comes to the scholarship opportunity. Now, in terms of guidance on whether to submit it to Wooster and how to make that choice, my general guidance to a student, and again, this can vary based on how selective a school is, but at Wooster, what I would tell you is if you're within or above our middle 50% that we publish on the SAT or ACT, feel free to send it. It's going to only help you. If you're below the middle 50%, so that really means you would be in our bottom quartile, our bottom 25%, it's probably not in your best interest to submit it. Now, there might be a nuance to that situation if someone has a grade trend that is questionable, but they're just a little bit below our middle 50%, they might want to submit that because they think it helps us see that they're on the upswing, they're on the upward trend. But generally, middle 50% or higher is when I would say it's most comfortable to submit. I'll just add lastly that, we began being test optional, I think it was back in 2019. So before COVID, Worcester made the decision after doing a study and looking at our data that concluded at Worcester there was little to no correlation between test scores and outcomes. So prior to COVID, we were already moving in this direction that a lot of people shifted to after COVID.
Well, we appreciate that. And you made it very clear that you can absolutely review applications, whether or not they have those standardized tests. And I'm talking about when you mentioned the scholarship process specifically, whether or not a student submitted scores or not, you're not using them in the scholarship process just to level the playing field. But again, it points to the fact that you absolutely, not only Worcester, but many colleges and universities can absolutely review applications without standardized tests. Now, Jason, in the activities section of the application, many students list what they've done without explaining their why. With such limited space, I believe it's 150 characters, how important is it for applicants to convey motivation or impact? And can you share an example of a student who really used that space especially well?
Well, it's an important question, John. And I think one of the things that I definitely see some students who are in communities that get good counsel, and this is not about having good school counselors, because school counselors are spread so thin. I want to be really clear about that. But some students who get extra resources and extra supports often make really good use of that short space on an activity line. And then other students, I think, don't cut to the part of it that we need the most, which is the impact it had on them and their specific role. So, for example, I think it's one of these areas where we know, generally speaking, what Model UN is, right? So if they're doing Model UN, there's no need to explain Model UN and then not leave any room to explain their role on that particular activity. The same with National Honor Society. Now, if there's a nuanced club that has an acronym that only your school knows, probably take a little bit of space so we understand what that club is. But then it's more important. An example I would give is, a student that would indicate the recycling club, for example, right? That they were on or part of the recycling club. And what's really good use of that space is to say, if this is accurate for them, that they petition the school administration to remove plastic water bottles. And the school is now saving 4,000 water bottles a year, or some other example like that, where now we have context. They weren't just a member, they were actually an active member. Or if they were the president, what did that big initiative look like for the president of this organization? Because those roles can look different in different communities. But I would also add the order in which someone indicates their activity list is also worth thinking about. And I don't want students to get so panicked that if it's second or third, that makes the biggest difference. But an example I would give is if someone's passion has been swimming, right? They may be tempted because of all the hours they put into it to put swimming first, just because that's where they spend a lot of time. But if they were to stop and think about an activity that meant the most to them or that helped them grow the most, maybe that is something that had to do with volunteering with an organization that was about women in STEM. And so maybe that becomes something that they put higher than swimming simply because for them, and it should be authentic and it should be real. It shouldn't be because they think it's going to make us more excited to admit them. But if they truly believe that is a defining feature of who they are today, to indicate that higher than another activity is important. And again, I don't want them to overthink these things, but they should put some thought into what was my impact in that organization that I can highlight in the description, and which ones really define me the most in terms of the order they list them.
Well, I think that's great advice. And again, it points to the fact that there are human beings on the other side of it. And if you list 10 activities and I don't know, you lose a little bit of engagement in reviewing it by activity number 6, maybe, Jason, just maybe, I'm not saying your team, but maybe some people just skim through to number 10. So the point is, students, I think it's key advice here that Jason is providing. Make sure that the most important activities are definitely listed first so that, again, you give that overall best look in terms of who you are as a person. And speaking of which, Jason, the personal statement is where students often try their hardest to stand out. What makes an essay genuinely compelling to Wooster's admissions team, and what are the most common mistakes you see in that thing we call the personal statement?
Well, the personal statement in an ideal world should be a space where obviously at some baseline level, we get a sense of the quality of writing. I know there's a world of AI we're all working through right now, and there's impacts to that. And I think I don't want to get overly political or overly on one side of the argument here, but I think the reality is higher ed is using AI at certain levels, right? As we all are. So I'm not even going to suggest a student is never using it in an application. But I think that what's really important is that we do want to understand how they think, how they write, and how they can communicate. So as long as that's coming through in an authentic way, that's really important for us, number one. In addition to that, the essay is really a chance to add a layer of understanding about who they are as a person, who they might be as a community member, that goes beyond the obvious, if you will, that on that activity list we just talked about. That may be very clear they're active in STEM and research. That doesn't mean they have to write about the research. It may be that they're an active sports leader or the head of the band, whatever it might be. They don't have to write about their most prominent activity in the main essay. The personal statement is a chance to share a layer of themselves that is not coming through as naturally, perhaps, in the activities, the biodemographic section, from their letters of recommendation, or any other part of the required parts of the application. So I think for me, I think back to times where I've read applications historically, and I remember a student years ago at another institution I worked for that wrote about basically the repo man coming to their house. And their parents had advised them to shut the lights off and to hide and to pretend they weren't home. And they kind of went on this narrative of how they did come home one day and there were people in their room smoking cigarettes as their stuff was packed up and being hauled out. And this was a student that the same school counselor was able to share. No one knew this. No one in their school community, and it was a wealthy community, had any idea this family was going through this, and the student never let on. And again, I think that didn't get them accepted, right? Because they shared a traumatic experience. But it allowed us to understand that this achievement that we're seeing in academic areas, or the involvement we're seeing in extracurriculars, is happening with all of this also happening at home. And for a counselor to reiterate that they know they're going through it, but that's just not something they share with their community, it just adds a layer of understanding about who the person might be. Because we're admitting people. We're not admitting an application, we're admitting people. And it's helpful for us to understand the people that we're going to have in our community.
Well, I think that's such an amazing example. And again, students, it points to the fact that you don't have to share something so traumatic or tragic. Hopefully, no one goes through anything like that. But the idea is that if your activity sheet is filled with things around swimming because you're the captain of the swim team, you put something together where you tutor younger people on the swim team or whatever it is, and then you write your personal statement about something related to the swim team, it's really a missed opportunity to give more context in terms of who you are as a person. So we say it all the time, students. It's important to, again, understand the different parts of the application, what they are each intended for, how they have to complement, build upon each other without necessarily repeating the same information time and time again. And so to Jason's point, sharing a story like that, again, doesn't mean that the student necessarily was admitted, as Jason said, but it gave such great context in terms of what this poor child was dealing with outside of school, and yet was very involved, it seems, in his high school's community. And it seems that that child did extremely well academically, again, providing a total different context. And in terms of that, Jason, when it comes to your supplemental essay, what signals to you that a student truly understands Worcester's mission, your mentorship model, and distinctive research opportunities?
Well, it's a really valuable question because I think the use of that space in the supplemental essay is probably underutilized by most people, right? I think a lot of people spend so much time on the main essay, and I appreciate you're highlighting the fact that the main essay doesn't have to be traumatic, right? It doesn't have to be that. And in fact, it can be humorous if you're funny. Don't try to be funny, but if you're funny, be funny. It's okay. Because we want to learn personality there. With a supplemental essay, most schools are trying to get something more specific to their institution. And for us, we are trying to create a space for a student in our supplemental essay to share something about themselves that they don't think has come through yet that would be valuable for us to understand as we consider them as a community member for Worcester. So for some students, they've done so much homework on us and they see such a strong fit. They might mention a certain faculty member's research area as something that's drawing them to campus. They could mention a coach because we've got great athletic programs and maybe there's a connection that way. Could be a music connection. Could be a lot of specifics, but it doesn't have to be. In other words, if a student isn't as adept at being able to pinpoint and articulate exactly what's drawn them to us, but they know they feel drawn to us, then they should feel comfortable to just share in a short few sentences what it is about themselves that makes them a strong candidate for us, in the sense of what they have the ability to show us is that they are more than their activities. And this is why they think they can be a contributing member in our community. And the skills, the interpersonal qualities, they can share something more specific to them as a person that perhaps didn't fit somewhere else on the application. So it's great to learn that someone has been through our website or been through our materials and can repeat some of the highlights of those things. But we recognize these are 17-year-old students. They are looking and being flooded with information from colleges, and it is hard to get down to applying to 3 schools or 7 schools or whatever their number is. So I want to give some grace to the degree to which we can about how specific they have to be about us. But I do think it's an opportunity, if they can't be specific in making a connection between their match with us, that they can at least make a connection between their match with what they can contribute to a community. And that either way, then we learn more about them.
Well, it's such a great point. And again, it comes under this theme of how can we learn more about you, students? So again, use every part of the application accordingly. Now, Jason, we talked a lot about your great community, and I was very curious, how does Worcester support students with IEPs, 504 plans, or perhaps who had learning differences so that they can fully thrive academically and personally?
Well, it's been more than 25 years ago, Worcester was recognized as being an outstanding place for personalized learning and support through the Colleges That Change Lives book by Lauren Pope. We've continued to be a leader in that space. We have professionally staffed the Academic Resource Center on campus that's part of APEX, which is our larger umbrella student support area that includes global education, study abroad opportunities in there. But again, specifically the ARC within that space works with students with a variety of learning differences. The ARC for us, what's really nice about it is that they open up individual appointments and opportunities for conversation with prospective students and families. Oftentimes at schools, these offices can be so overtaxed that they really can't really engage with a student or a family until they're already deeper into the application process or already planning to enroll. But we can create those conversations on the front end so that a student knows if we're a good match to support them down the road. So they don't have to wait. They can begin that early on. And in addition, we have I would say, more traditional support areas on campus, a math center, writing center, world language centers, ways in which we can support students. And again, it gets back to one of the things I think makes Wooster so special is that it gets back to when you look at our mid 90% job placement rates, mid 90% grad school placement rates, these incredible outcomes. You would assume that everyone had to be a perfect straight A student when they got in the door here, and that we just took them from that space and we didn't have much to do. We have those students. There are plenty of straight A students that come to Worcester, but there's plenty of students who are hitting their stride as they graduate. There are blemishes in their academic background, but we allow them to kind of take off and run. And it's because we're so well resourced in these spaces that we have great staff that really, really care. And I can't emphasize that enough. I was at one of our admitted student programs this past weekend, and I went and I shadowed these sessions, and I was listening to the students talk, listening to our staff talk, and the care comes through so strongly on a place like Worcester. And again, it just reverberates throughout every area, and the ARC is just one of those places.
Well, definitely you have a lot of resources, and I know that the care definitely comes through, and you gave us a lot to unpack there. But one of the things that I want to mention is that the College of Wooster is, in fact, part of the colleges that change lives. So, Jason, could you just elaborate a little bit in terms of what that means to be a part of that organization?
So the colleges that change lives, I'm going to get the exact number wrong now. I believe it's about 40 or so schools. And we tend to be the small liberal arts colleges. One of the great things I will say is if a family is drawn to small liberal arts colleges, like a place like Worcester, keep an eye out for the Colleges that Change Lives college fairs that come throughout the country, because it creates a really curated opportunity to see all of us in one space. And I think one of the hardest things for students and families to do is to figure out what makes a place different from another. Small liberal arts colleges can sound no different than big flagship institutions. At a distance, we can sound similar. But when you begin to talk and figure out the nuances, whether it's independent study at Worcester or some other program in another school, it takes some of that discussion time to really figure out what makes us different. But I think a college fair setting like that does a lot to help students figure us out in one setting and to learn more specifically about what we value. So we tend to be colleges that do a great job supporting students, nurturing students, and also leading to incredible outcomes. I think one of the things that students can misunderstand when they hear that a college takes students from running or walking all the way to running at the end, or that they hear words like we support our students, they can assume inaccurately some level of excellence that they're missing. And in fact, the excellence is that every student gets that attention. And so we are investing our dollars where we believe it matters most, and that's at the student level. That doesn't mean there's not access for massive research or nuanced internships, but it means we are investing in the people.
Well, you're definitely investing in the people, and I appreciate you giving us the overview of the colleges that change lives. And I'll definitely link their website in the show notes, along with the College of Worcester's admissions office and so much more. Now, Jason, you've collaborated with many students, counselors, and families over the years. Again, you've been at multiple institutions. What's one misconception you wish people better understood about applying to Worcester or attending a liberal arts college in general?
So you're going to ask me for one question, one thing. I'm going to make it a two-parter, but they're both tied to one answer. I think our location is probably the biggest misunderstanding a family might have about Worcester. Whether that's being in Northeast Ohio or in Worcester, Ohio, it can lead to assumptions. The first and biggest fallacy that exists out there is that there's a limit on research or experiential learning because we are in a town of 27,000 people, an hour from Cleveland, Ohio, maybe 45 minutes to the airport, an hour and a half to Columbus, Ohio. But that's false. And in fact, what we find through conversations with our students and our faculty, and I can distinctly remember an engagement I had earlier this year with a faculty member when I talked about how a student was looking at a big research school in our state. And because they viewed that as better access to research. And to watch the reaction of that faculty member is like, but don't they know that's not true? And it's not to disparage the big research universities, but I think sometimes students get enamored with the big lab buildings that they see on those campuses. And what they aren't stopping to think about is, what will my access to those be like? What will my access be like to the faculty that lead those research initiatives? So at a place like Wooster, research is everywhere, from education to the music areas, to the sciences, to economics. And so I think that's one misunderstanding, is our location would limit you in terms of access for internships or access for research. The other, I would say, in terms of our location, is just the city itself. And what I mean by that is Midwestern small towns can get lumped together if you don't travel them or experience different ones, and you're coming from East Coast or West Coast. If you haven't traveled the Midwest frequently, you can misunderstand and think every Midwestern town is the same. But what's different is Worcester's location has actually, and the kind of community and economic community we have, has been highlighted. We are the number 3 ranked micropolitan city in the United States. Micropolitan cities are rankings that come out that assess cities that are between 10,000 and 50,000 in size, and they're looking at ways in which the city's business development projects have taken off, economic climate exists, the commitment to fostering business growth. Worcester has been recognized as a great micropolitan city for years. We are in a great city, and other thing I'll add is that because we are just far enough away from the big cities, we don't rely on the big cities for our entertainment, for our cultural opportunities. We have an incredible investment in the city itself.
Well, I think that's such great advice. And it also points to the fact that when you're at a school that has a lower faculty to student ratio, I would imagine that, and you touched upon it, but the access to the professor and the work that they are doing, it's probably, I don't want to say easier, but it's more accessible, if you will, at a school like the College of Wooster. Unfortunately, we are getting close to the end, Jason, but before we wrap up, I always like to ask, is there a question that I didn't ask you today that you wish I had, or something else that didn't come up that's important about Worcester that families don't hear often enough?
Well, I've tried to sprinkle some of this in throughout. I think the idea that we can take an A student, an AB student, and help them get to where they're achieving excellence by the time they graduate and are prepared to actually show an employer or show a graduate school, this is the work I can do. And we hear this from students often about how in an interview setting, they were in a conversation, they mentioned their independent study project, and the number of questions that then jumped off the page for that interviewer about learning more and being impressed by what that means, it becomes more than hiring someone you think can do the work, but hiring someone you can see has done the work. I think it's a big difference at Worcester. I would also add that I probably have not done a good enough job emphasizing that some of the cultural fun at Worcester, while we talked about independent study and the march, we have a senior symposium day where students will have opportunities to show the community the work that they've done on their independent study projects. Along these celebratory moments, whether it's leading the football team out to the game or whether it's the march for IS around campus, we have bagpipers. So if you're a bagpiper or if you're involved in Scottish arts, we have a Scottish Arts Scholarship opportunity for students. We recruit students for piping. We recruit students for Highland dance. It's a really big part of our identity at Worcester, and we're excited to share that. And the last thing I'll mention, because there's scholarship opportunities students can read about, but another thing that gets undersold is the access for business opportunities and entrepreneurship. We have a Yenia Investment Club on campus that invests about $12 million worth of the college's endowment year after year. This club last year, I want to say it was about 40 students from 17 different countries were represented in this organization investing these dollars. And this is highlighted over and over again by other student investment clubs on other college campuses to see how much money our students have access to, but what it means to actually be in that space. When I can't emphasize enough, 17 different countries in a student organization. You come to a small place like Worcester and you learn from each other. And that's really something I want people to take away as well as they think about our college.
Well, that's terrific. And this has been a phenomenal conversation. Jason, I can't thank you enough. Unfortunately, it does lead us to the last question, which is, What are your top pieces of advice? And you've given so many already, but what are your top pieces of advice for students and families navigating the college search and application process, especially if Wooster is on their list?
Well, I think there's a lot of different ways I can answer this. And so I'll try this approach this time because I've answered this in different settings to different people before. Again, I've been fortunate to work at a top 15 private university. I've worked at one of the top public universities before. And I think when I think about coming back to Worcester, when I think about being offered the job and people said, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "Going to the College of Wooster." And academics knew right away about the College of Wooster. Deans knew right away. Oh my gosh, one of my grad school roommates went to Worcester. High school counselors know about Worcester. And so I think we are known in spaces, candidly, that matter. When people think about what you can do when you finish college, we are known in those spaces. And so with that comes the challenge of being not in a top 10 or top 20 ranking. So my challenge to families is to say, take the rankings for what they are. They're a starting point, but really think about what you value. Think about what a college is spending its money on. And I would say at Worcester, the difference is that you're coming here because of our people, not because of the ranking. And I mean that in the sense that it's not to dismiss all rankings. There's value in some of these things. We rank highly in, senior capstone and libraries in different areas as well. But if you're caught up too much and only looking at a list that says schools 1 to 20 are going to be the ones that will lead to good results, or 1 to 50, you're missing a whole swath of amazing institutions. And I'm not here to advocate for all of them. I'm here to advocate for Worcester. But I really do believe that students can too quickly get caught up in a name game about where they can say they've gone or where they can tell their friends they're going. And in the end, they're not thinking enough, maybe because they don't know or they haven't been educated enough from other people, but they don't know that they should be thinking about where they're going to learn best, where they're going to thrive, and where they're going to be challenged to go from where they are to the best version of themselves. And that's what Worcester really specializes in, is taking people and helping them reach their full potential.
Well, they are definitely lucky to have you, as were we. You did Worcester extremely well today. Jason, I do look forward to having you again in the future. Thank you so much for giving your time and expertise today.
My pleasure, John. I really appreciate the opportunity.
The pleasure was all ours. And to everyone out there, good luck with the college search. Take care all, and best wishes.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the CAP. Thank you for listening to the College Admissions Process Podcast presented by Prep Expert. Prep Expert offers live online SAT and ACT courses with the best score guarantees, instructors, and curriculum. Go to prepexpert.com to guarantee your child's success.